Chapter 81 The Night Sky of Braavos. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Walking along the red-carpeted passage, I finally saw the King of the Sea, Rego Antarian, sitting on the throne. Neptune raised his eyes slightly, his eyes fell on Gavin, and then he was ready to stand up to greet him. At this time, the blood dragon guard behind Gavin brought the faceless man up and threw him heavily to the ground. Gavin was the first to speak, and said with a serious look, "Your Highness Neptune, I'm sorry for disturbing you late at night, but I just don't know what you think about this matter." Neptune immediately apologized and said sincerely, "Sir Gavin, as my guest, such a dangerous thing happened in Braavos. It was really a serious negligence on my part. I would like to express my deep apology to you. As long as you stay in Braavos, I will do my best to ensure your safety." Gavin did not speak after hearing this, but walked up to the faceless man. Seeing that Gavin did not answer, Neptune hurriedly said, "Sir Gavin, I promise you that you will never let this kind of thing happen again while you are in Braavos. I will definitely give you corresponding compensation tomorrow." Then, Neptune looked at Daenerys aside and said gently, "Princess Daenerys, regarding your brother, I will also compensate you tomorrow." Gavin quickly thanked him. "Thank you for your thoughtful consideration, Your Highness." Then he asked with a puzzled look on his face, "Your Highness, Neptune, could you tell me who hired the faceless man?" Neptune said helplessly, "Sir Gavin, although I can control the House of Black and White not to take action against you while in Braavos, I cannot ask you about the specific situation of the employee." Gavin frowned and asked, "His Royal Highness Neptune means that as long as I can guarantee not to be assassinated by the faceless men while I am in Braavos, once I leave, the faceless men will still come to my door, right?" Neptune was full of apologies, but just sighed and explained, "The House of Black and White must also abide by the laws of Braavos. As long as I am in Braavos, I have the right to stop them from harming my guests, but I have no right to interfere with them. Braavos respects the beliefs of all gods, this is the foundation on which Braavos is built, but there is nothing I can do outside of Braavos." Tyrion, who was on the side, explained to Gavin, "Once the faceless man accepts a mission, he will definitely complete it. If the assassination fails, another faceless man will be sent out until the mission is completed." Gavin thought for a moment and said, "It seems like this is really a big trouble." Neptune said solemnly, "Sir Gavin, during your stay in Braavos, I will send additional manpower to protect your safety. You don't need to worry about the faceless men." Gavin nodded slightly, "Thank you, Your Majesty the Sea King, but there's no need to bother." Then he pointed at the faceless man on the ground, and a fiery tongue of fire instantly spurted out from his hand. The faceless man's scream came, the sound was shrill and desperate, echoing in the empty hall. Moments later, the faceless man was reduced to ashes. Neptune and Tyrion were so shocked by Gavin's methods that their eyes widened with disbelief on their faces. The water dancers in the Neptune Palace also nervously drew their weapons and pointed them at Gavin, becoming alert. After killing the faceless man, Gavin ignored the water dancer who drew his sword in the Palace of Neptune. Instead, he took Daenerys' hand and said to Neptune, "I'm sorry to disturb your rest, Your Highness." Neptune was about to say something, "Sir Gavin." Gavin just bowed and saluted, then turned around and led Daenerys away. When walking to the square in front of the Neptune Palace, Gavin ordered the Blood Dragon Guard to return to the Bellerys immediately, and then released Blazing Shadow. Blazing Shadow quickly rushed out of the flames in the air. It felt Gavin's killing intent and roared excitedly. Gavin took Daenerys and climbed onto Blazing Shadow's dragon's back. Chiang's hind legs kicked hard, and his huge body instantly bounced up and shot straight into the night sky. Its broad wings flapped vigorously, and a howling wind followed. The muscles were tense, and the shining scales shone in the moonlight, showing a strong figure. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the vast night, leaving only a shadow in the air. Daenerys asked in Gavin's arms, "Gavin, what are you going to do?" Hearing Daenerys' question, Gavin said calmly, "Of course I'll use the Dragon King's method and give the opponent blood and fire. If it's not necessary, I don't want to provoke the Faceless Men, a group of assassins who are extremely good at disguise. But since we have already provoked him, there is no reason to always be on guard." While they were talking, blazing shadow had already flown to the port and landed on the deck of the Bellerys. The blood dragon guards and soldiers who stayed here quickly came to greet her. Gavin put Daenerys down behind the dragon and said, "Braavos is a little unsafe now, so just wait for me on the boat, and I will pick you up later." Daenerys wanted to say something, but she was afraid that Gavin would be distracted, so she just nodded and said, "Gavin, be safe." Gavin smiled at her, patted Chiang lightly, and ordered, "Chiang, take off." Chiang unfolded its huge and powerful wings, and strong airflow swept all around in an instant. Its body squatted slightly, its leg muscles tensed, and then it suddenly jumped up. The huge wings flapped hard, bringing up strong winds, and the sails of the ship were blown wildly. The blazing shadow soared into the sky and burst into the night sky of Braavos. Looking down from the night sky, Braavos below is bustling. Colorful lights interweave together, illuminating the streets and alleys. The crowds are bustling, and laughter echoes in every corner. The fireworks of the celebration are one after another, blooming gorgeous flowers in the sky. The ships in the port are brightly lit, reflecting the light of the city, forming a beautiful picture. In the Sea King's palace, the Sea King looked at the direction where Gavin left, and remained silent for a long time. Rien said, "Your Highness, this Sir Gavin has such mysterious means besides dragons. Will he take action against the House of Black and White?" The Sea King slowly said, "I hope he won't. As long as he doesn't bring too much trouble to Braavos. I don't want to provoke him, but I am also worried. I hope he won't be impulsive." Rien nodded and said, "Your Highness, should we strengthen our defense?" The Sea King pondered for a moment. "Well, strengthen our vigilance immediately. If Gavin has any radical behavior, send a fleet to block the mouth of the canyon. The other side also brought a lot of soldiers. Send soldiers to block the dock to prevent Gavin's soldiers from entering the city." Gavin rode on blazing shadow and circled in the night sky of Braavos. The whistling wind whistled in his ears, blowing his clothes. Gavin looked down and observed the terrain with sharp eyes. He soon locked the area of the Isle of the Gods. After confirming the direction, Gavin gently pulled the reins, and Blazing Shadow immediately understood and flew towards the Isle of the Gods. Chapter 82 Blood and Fire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the altitude continued to drop, the Isle of the Gods below gradually became clearer. At this time, the people of Braavos who were attending the Moon Song Festival on the Isle of the Gods also saw the giant dragon rushing towards them, and screams rose and fell instantly. Some people collapsed to the ground in fear, some fled in panic, and some stared at the sky blankly, their faces full of fear and despair. At this time, Gavin found the location of the black and white courtyard, with a strong murderous look in his eyes, and immediately pulled the reins lightly. Sensing the master's intention, Chiang instantly understood, folded his wings, and swooped towards the black and white courtyard like a flash of lightning. Chiang rushed down towards the black and white courtyard like a blazing flame. When it approached the dark grey stone temple, it began to hover, then opened its huge dragon mouth, and a hot flame gushed out. The dragon flame hit the pointed black tile roof of the black and white courtyard like a violent angry dragon. The high temperature instantly turned the black tiles red, and the powerful impact shattered the black tiles. The flames rushed into the temple like a flood along the broken roof. In the temple, the 30 statues of various shapes standing along the wall, and the red candles that were originally swaying at their feet were instantly engulfed in the sea of fire. The statues were tall and dangerous, but now they looked a little hideous under the raging flames. The flames licked the statues, and the cloth decorations on them quickly burned. The fire spread along the statues, as if to completely devour these mysterious beings. The 10-foot diameter pool in the center of the temple boiled violently under the high temperature, and water vapor was steaming. The originally quiet main room turned into a purgatory at this moment, with flames running wildly and thick smoke billowing. The flames not only poured into the main room, but also flowed along the winding passage to the monks' dormitories. The monks' dormitories were instantly engulfed by flames, and their beds and clothes instantly caught fire. The panicked monks ran and shouted desperately in the sea of fire, and their screams were endless. The flames licked their bodies mercilessly, their skin was quickly scorched, and their hair and eyebrows turned to ashes in an instant. Some people tried to put out the flames with quilts, but it was in vain, and they could only fall down in extreme pain. The flames continued to spread and flowed into the countless caves dug in the temple. The items in the caves turned into ashes in an instant, and the people hiding in them were surrounded by rolling heat waves and struggled painfully. They desperately crawled deep into the cave, hoping to find a glimmer of life, but the ruthless flames chased them and swallowed their hopes bit by bit. The blazing shadow continued to spit dragon flames in the air, and Gavin rode on its back, staring closely at the black and white courtyard below. At this time, he saw that the carved wooden door seemed to open a crack slightly. The blazing shadow immediately landed in front and sprayed even hotter dragon flames at the wooden door. Under the scorching dragon flames, the wooden door quickly became charred. The originally delicate carvings began to blur, and the wood on the side of the door began to crack. Then, the fire spread from the side of the door to the entire door. After a while, the entire wooden door was completely burned, and the raging fire completely engulfed it. The acolytes who had just planned to open the door and escape encountered this sudden disaster. They were enveloped by the fierce flames before they even had time to scream. The high temperature instantly invaded their bodies, and their clothes and hair burned almost instantly. Their skin was burned and cracked black. They struggled and twisted in pain in the sea of fire, but they could not escape the ruthless flames. The flames continued to gush forward along the corridor in the temple, spreading further into the depths. Wherever they went, whether it was the walls, the ground or other objects, they were eroded by the high temperature and flames. The rooms hidden in the depths were not spared, and the people and objects inside were involved in this terrible disaster. The entire black and white courtyard was engulfed in flames. The former solemnity and mystery were completely destroyed, leaving only blazing fire and billowing smoke, as if telling the catastrophe that had happened here. At this time, the people who were still on the island of the gods witnessed the dragon attacking the black and white courtyard with their own eyes, and their expressions were so shocked that they seemed to be frozen. They stared with their eyes wide open and their mouths wide open, but they could not make a sound, and they could not believe what was happening before their eyes. Fear spread rapidly among the crowd like a plague, and the originally joyful and peaceful island of the gods fell into extreme chaos. People pushed and crowded, trying to escape from this terrible place. The cries of children and the shouts of adults intertwined, forming a noisy noise. Some people were trampled under the feet of the crazy fleeing crowd, groaning in pain. Some lost their direction and bumped around like headless flies. Others stood there stupidly, frightened by the scene in front of them and lost the ability to move. Some brave soldiers tried to maintain order. They shouted loudly and waved their weapons in their hands, trying to guide people to evacuate in an orderly manner. But in the face of this overwhelming panic, their efforts seemed so insignificant. The women hugged their children tightly, their faces full of tears and fear, and they ran desperately away from the black and white courtyard. The merchants did not bother to pack up their goods, just hoping to save their lives. The entire island of God seemed to have turned into a hell on earth, with chaos, and the roar of the dragon and the raging fire burning in the black and white courtyard became the most frightening background sound of this disaster. As the dragon flame continued to spew out from the door of the black and white courtyard, the powerful impact and high temperature made the entire black and white courtyard building shaky. The stones on the wall began to loosen, and from time to time large pieces of stone fell down, hitting the ground with a dull sound. The originally solid stone beams also became fragile under the high temperature, making heart-wrenching creaking sounds, as if they would break at any time. Some decorative stone carvings on the building began to melt, and the originally exquisite lines became blurred and distorted, dripping with hot liquid. The carved wooden door had long been reduced to a pile of burning ashes under the continuous attack of the dragon flame. The fire spread inward along the door frame, devouring everything that could burn. The statues in the house gradually collapsed in the high temperature, turning into piles of burning rubble. The stone slabs on the ground were also burned red, and even cracks began to appear, as if the earth was also groaning in pain under this terrifying power. Thick smoke rose from the black and white courtyard, rushing straight into the sky, dyeing the surrounding sky dark. The roar of the fire and the roar of the collapsed building intertwined, as if it was the desperate wail of the black and white courtyard. At this time, the chaos on the island of gods reached its peak. People fled in panic, trampling on each other, and the screams and cries were deafening. Some people knelt on the ground in despair, praying to God for help, while others went crazy and rushed to the seaside desperately, trying to escape from this terrible place by boat. Chapter 83, Strange Black Shadow. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At this time, in the depths of the black and white courtyard, there seemed to be some mysterious power struggling to support it, so that the black and white courtyard did not completely collapse under the violent ravages of the dragon flame. The mysterious power was still fighting against the dragon flame at first, but as time went on, it was obviously unable to resist the surging heat and began to shrink rapidly. As the mysterious power shrank, the originally shaky black and white courtyard could no longer support it, and the entire building began to collapse. The walls collapsed, raising dust all over the sky, the roof fell heavily, making a deafening noise. This once majestic and mysterious building has now turned into a ruin under the attack of the dragon flame. However, the dragon flame ejected by the blazing shadow has not stopped, and it continues to spew into the ruins. The blazing flames raged in the ruins, turning everything that had not yet burned into ashes. At this moment, a shadow-like energy rushed out of the ruins. This ball of energy was dark and strange, as if it carried endless resentment and anger. The dragon flame of Chiang immediately sprayed towards it, and the black shadow swirled and twisted in the air, trying to break through the encirclement of the dragon flame. Gavin rode on Chiang's back, drew the sword at his waist, and locked his eyes on the black shadow vigilantly. The black shadow obviously also discovered Gavin on his back, and quickly bypassed the dragon flame and Chiang in the air and rushed towards Gavin. Gavin instantly activated the flame blade, and the long sword burned with fierce flames, slashing at the black shadow fiercely, splitting the black shadow in half at once. After the two black shadows bypassed Gavin, they merged into one again, but its size became smaller. The black shadow obviously realized that Gavin was not easy to mess with, and began to try to escape. Gavin immediately chased with Chiang, and the black shadow floated into the sky, as if to hide in the night, but was locked tightly by Gavin and chased all the way. As Gavin and the black shadow left, the people on the entire island of gods fell into a complex emotion. Those who witnessed the dragon attacking the black and white house were filled with a sense of relief for having survived. Some of them had weak legs and sat on the ground, gasping for breath, as if they wanted to spit out all the breath they had been holding back because of fear. Some hugged each other and cried, tears of joy flowing freely. Others had dull eyes, as if they had not yet recovered from the thrilling scene. In the crowd, an old man trembled and put his hands together, muttering to himself, thanking the gods for their favor. Several young people talked about the thrilling scene just now, and their voices were still trembling. The women hugged their children tightly and kissed their foreheads, feeling fortunate that the family was safe. The originally lively moon chant festival turned into a peacefulness after chaos. While people were grateful, they were also confused and uncertain about the future. But in any case, they were still alive at this moment, which was the greatest luck. Gavin chased the black shadow all the way, and the blazing shadow flapped its huge wings, and the wind whistled in his ears. The speed of the black shadow gradually slowed down. Gavin saw the right moment and swung out the flame blade again. The powerful flame formed a flame wave that left the black shadow nowhere to escape. Under the high temperature, the black shadow suddenly dived towards the sea surface and sank directly into the water, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Gavin frowned and ordered the blazing shadow to hover on the sea surface, carefully looking for the trace of the black shadow. The height of the blazing shadow gradually decreased. Just as they were concentrating on searching, several tentacles formed by sea water suddenly rushed out from under the sea surface, and slammed towards the blazing shadow with a fierce momentum. The blazing shadow reacted quickly and immediately spit out a mouthful of dragon flame. The hot flame instantly evaporated the tentacles formed by the sea water into water vapor. Just when Gavin just breathed a sigh of relief, countless tentacles emerged from the sea water in all directions, sweeping towards the low-altitude blazing shadow like a group of dancing snakes. Gavin's face turned stern, and he shouted loudly, "Chiang, take off." Chiang flapped his huge wings and flew upwards, successfully avoiding the fierce tentacles. Gavin, who avoided the attack, commanded Chiang to hover in the sky far away from the sea with a solemn look, staring at the turbulent sea water below, with deep fear in his eyes. Suddenly, countless tentacles suddenly emerged from the sea water, and those tentacles seemed to be able to cleverly use the power of the sea surface to stand up on the sea, gradually revealing an extremely huge body, a hideous and terrifying monster with tentacles all over the body, which was disgusting to watch. Countless black shadows in the body of the monster made of sea water surged like ghosts. Gavin's heart trembled violently. Obviously, the mysterious black shadow used sea water as material to create such a huge body for itself. In an instant, this huge and terrifying tentacle monster suddenly jumped up with the force of thunder, and rushed towards Chiaying in the air with an overwhelming momentum. Chiaying did not hesitate and instantly spurted out a ball of blazing dragon flame. The high temperature instantly evaporated a large amount of seawater, making a terrifying hissing sound, and the billowing water vapor filled the air like smoke and fog. However, the opponent's body was too huge, and the dragon flame ejected by Chiaying seemed extremely small in comparison. Even though the blazing dragon flame evaporated a large amount of seawater, there were still countless strong and powerful tentacles like giant pythons entangled over it. Those tentacles made of seawater tightly bound Chiaying's body, and even Gavin on the dragon's back could not escape the fierce attack of the tentacles. Gavin waved his flaming sword to resist desperately, but suddenly, a cold and slippery tentacle quickly wrapped around his ankle like a poisonous snake, and an irresistible force suddenly pulled him off the dragon's back. Gavin could not help but fall rapidly into the water. At this critical moment, he looked up at the sky with despair, and saw that Chiaying had been tightly entangled by layers of tentacles, completely losing the ability to fly, just like a bird trapped in an airtight giant net. Although it struggled desperately, it still could not stop falling. Gavin immediately shouted, "Chiaying bathed in fire." Hearing the order, Chiaying's body instantly burst into thick flames. The tentacles that were originally entangled with it were sizzling due to the sudden high temperature, and some tentacles even loosened their restraints. However, the monster did not retreat because of this. Instead, it tightened other tentacles more frantically, trying to suppress Chiaying again, but as Chiaying's flesh and blood gradually turned into flames, the powerful heat almost evaporated the entire monster. Soon, Chiaying regained the right to control the air and regained the ability to move. At this time, Gavin was still falling rapidly. Seeing Chiaying break free from the restraints, he finally felt much more at ease. Chapter 84 Confrontation at the Port. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At this time, Gavin saw the black figure in the seawater rushing towards him who was still falling. Immediately afterwards, Black Shadow and Gavin fell into the sea water. In the water, the Black Shadow quickly formed a human shape, and its hand strangled Gavin's neck. Gavin fell into the water and couldn't breathe, his lungs felt like they were going to burst. Fortunately, the sword in his hand had not been thrown away at this time. Even though he was in the water, he still tried his best to use the flaming blade to pierce his body. The flaming sword began to burn the black figure crazily. The black figure gradually revealed a strange face without features, and the body burned by the flames twisted crazily, but he still pinched Gavin. "You owe me a life, Gavin Bellerys." As a voice full of hatred entered Gavin's heart, the black shadow could no longer resist the burning of the flames and began to gradually dissipate. Gavin finally broke free and swam toward the water. The moment he surfaced, he gasped for air, as if he was trying to suck all the air into his lungs. Blazing Shadow spread its broad and powerful wings and whirled down. Its hind paws accurately grabbed Gavin, who was limp in the water, and then flapped its wings and flew towards the Bellerys. Gavin lay weakly in Blazing Shadow's paws, the sea breeze blowing over his wet body, but his eyes were still fixed on the sea that had just experienced a life-and-death struggle, and his thoughts were tumbling. Is this Black Shadow the God of Thousand Faces, or a part of the will and power of the God of Thousand Faces? He thought about it. If it was a god, it would be too weak to be destroyed by me, but if it was just a part of the will and power of the thousand-faced god, I'm afraid there would be big trouble later. Thinking of this, Gavin's expression became more solemn. Are there any temples of the thousand-faced god in other places besides Braavos? I must check it out when I go back. I will destroy as many as there are. Since I have offended someone, I will offend them. Thorough. Not long after, Blazing Shadow landed on the deck of Bellerys. Daenerys had been waiting here impatiently, and when she saw Gavin in Blazing Shadow's claws, she rushed over desperately. Gavin. Daenerys's voice was full of worry and concern. Gavin forced a smile, his voice slightly hoarse. I'm fine, don't worry, everything is going well. Daenerys looked at his wet and embarrassed appearance, tears welling up in her eyes. How can it be okay? You are like this. Gavin patted Daenerys's hand gently and comforted. It's really okay. I just need to change clothes. Wait for me here for a while. After saying that, he walked towards the cabin. Daenerys looked at his back, worried. At this time, the Neptune King Rhaego Antarian in the Neptune Palace received the news that the court of Black and White was burned down by Gavin Zonlo. His face turned red instantly, his eyes widened, and his anger burned like a raging fire. He clenched his hands into fists and his whole body trembled slightly with rage. He gritted his teeth and roared, "This is Braavos. How dare he let the dragon run wild here? This is an insult to me and to the Majesty of Braavos. A huge provocation." With the roar of Neptune, the entire Neptune Palace fell into silence. Neptune's face turned red with anger, and his chest heaved violently. He looked at Tyran Rayan and roared, "Send a fleet immediately to block the mouth of the canyon. Don't let them escape. Then send troops to seal the entire dock for me." "Yes, Your Highness." Tyran Rayan took the order and left. With the departure of Tyran Rayan, Neptune gradually calmed down. He paced back and forth in the palace, his brows furrowed into a deep frown. Sea King kept weighing in his mind, it would be easier to leave Gavin's fleet parked in the port. But Gavin has a dragon after all. If he rides the dragon and leaves, he will definitely take revenge on Braavos in the future. The Dragon King's anger may plunge the entire city into disaster. Can Braavos withstand it? But if Gavin is not dealt with now, the Majesty of Braavos will inevitably be destroyed. This city was founded by people who once feared being enslaved by the Dragon King and chose to flee. Now another Dragon King brings his magic dragon, wreaking havoc here. If he doesn't make any response, his status as Sea King will be in jeopardy. Neptune's mind was racing with all the possible consequences, and he felt torn. Suddenly, Neptune stopped, took a deep breath, looked eagerly at the chief water dancer aside, and asked in a low and eager voice, "If Gavin comes here, can you summon the dragon before him?" "Killed it before." The water dancer looked troubled, with fine beads of sweat on his forehead, and replied in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, Gavin's method of spraying flames just now is beyond my understanding. I can't guarantee that I can do it." Neptune nodded helplessly, his expression still solemn, and he sighed and said, "Forget it, don't take risks, send someone to inform Tyran Rayan that he can only be besieged, and no attack is allowed without my order. In addition, let him invite Jia Wenlai Haiwang Palace." After Gavin changed his clothes, he walked to the deck with a steady pace. Daenerys hurriedly rushed forward, the worry in her eyes not completely dissipating. Gavin gently held her in his arms and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I won't let you get hurt in any way." At this moment, the captain hurried over, with a nervous expression and a hurried report, "Sir, the situation is not good. We seem to be surrounded by the Sea King's fleet. The surrounding area of the port is also terrifyingly quiet, without any unusual noise. I sent someone after some observation, we found that soldiers were guarding all the key points. The canyon leaving the port has been tightly blocked by Braavos warships. Our way out is blocked. Sir, do we want to forcefully set sail to break through?" Gavin narrowed his eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the port. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Don't worry. Since the opponent has made arrangements, a forced breakout may not be possible at this time. Immediately order the soldiers to strengthen their alert. The fleet is ready to fight at any time. I think Neptune shouldn't dare to take action, let's wait and see what they do next." The night got deeper and deeper, the sea breeze blew gently, and both parties waited quietly for a long time, as if time had frozen. Just when everyone's nerves were tense to the extreme, a Will Palace slowly approached the Bellerys docked at the port. The person who got off the carriage was Tyran Rayan, who was sent by the Sea King. He boarded the Bellerys and said with a rather respectful expression, "Sir Gavin, His Highness the Sea King invites you to go to the Sea King's palace for a talk." Gavin looked at Tyrion sharply and said after a moment, "Go back and tell Neptune that I will go there tomorrow morning." Tyrion bowed slightly and left in the car without saying a word. Chapter 85 The Sea King's Invitation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gavin stood on the deck, lost in thought. Daenerys walked up to him and said softly, "Gavin, could this be a trap?" Gavin held her hand and comforted her, "Don't worry too much. Even if it's really a trap, I can deal with it." At this time, Gavin was exhausted after a night of fighting, and there was not much magic power left in his body. Even Chiang lay tiredly on the bow of the boat and fell asleep. It was a helpless move to choose to meet tomorrow morning. That night, everyone on the Bellerys could not sleep. The moonlight shines on the sea, making the waves sparkling, but it cannot dispel the haze that envelopes people's hearts. Outside the port, Sea King's warships were still tightly blocked at the mouth of the canyon, showing no signs of evacuating. The soldiers of Braavos still stood on the dock, motionless, like silent statues. The early morning sun shone on the Bellerys. Gavin walked out of the cabin and saw the energetic blazing shadow. He was completely relieved. There was still a trace of worry in his heart about whether Neptune would jump over the wall. Thinking of this, Gavin ordered Chiang to possess him in the fire, then he turned around and returned to the cabin. Daenerys immediately came up to him and said with worry on his face, "Gavin, do you really want to go? This is too dangerous." Gavin gently hugged her shoulders and comforted, "My dear, don't worry. Since Neptune has invited me, if I don't go, it will appear that we are cowardly. Moreover, Blazing Shadow has recovered, and I am also prepared to deal with all situations." "Prepare for this situation." Daenerys bit her lip, her worried look still lingering. "I'll be with you." Gavin interrupted her and said with a smile, "Don't worry, even if there is an accident, I can escape at any time with Chiang, and since the other party invites me, there is a high probability that I will not take action." Daenerys knew she couldn't change Gavin's decision, so she could only nod. "Then you must be careful." Gavin responded and walked off the ship with only 2 blood dragon guards. When Gavin stepped onto the dock, the soldiers suddenly became nervous and unconsciously clenched their weapons. However, none of them dared to act rashly and silently made way for Gavin. Gavin looked calm and walked straight towards the Neptune Palace. Gavin once again stepped into the Neptune Palace, looked at the gloomy-looking regal Antalion sitting on the throne, bowed slightly and said, "His Royal Highness, Neptune, thank you for the invitation." Sea King sat on the throne and snorted heavily, "Gavin Bellerys, I invite you to be my guest. But you let the dragons wreak havoc in Braavos and burn down the House of Black and White." Gavin straightened up, looked at Neptune calmly, and responded, "Your Highness Neptune, I have always adhered to my duty in Braavos. However, as a guest, I was assassinated in Braavos, and you can't guarantee that. For my safety, I naturally had to fight back." Neptune frowned, raised his voice and said, "I have already promised to compensate you and ensure your safety here." Gavin nodded and said, "I appreciate His Highness the Sea King's kindness. But I want to know, what should I do if I am assassinated by the Faceless Men again after leaving Braavos? You can't guarantee that the House of Black and White will give up the assassination. I can only solve the problem by myself. As long as the problem is not solved, what happened last night will happen sooner or later." Neptune was speechless for a moment, and then argued forcefully, "The Court of Black and White." Gavin interrupted him and said firmly, "The House of Black and White may have its rules, but when my life is threatened, I must take action to protect myself." Neptune frowned and raised his voice and said, "I have already promised to compensate you. I will let you go to my treasure house to choose at will, and you will take it with Daenerys' compensation. However, because you are what Braavos has done. After you choose your gifts, please leave immediately. From today on, you and your fleet will never set foot in Braavos." Gavin looked calm and responded, "Your Highness Neptune, I had no intention of causing trouble here. Now that the problem is solved, I will naturally leave." Neptune stared at Gavin sharply and said, "I hope you will keep your word." otherwise the anger of Braavos will not be something you can bear. Gavin bowed and saluted. Don't worry, Your Highness Neptune, I will definitely keep my promise. Neptune waved his hand, signaling the end of the conversation. Under the guidance of a water dancer, Gavin slowly moved forward along the deep corridor. Every few steps on both sides of the corridor stood a fully armed guard, holding sharp spears tightly in their hands, as motionless as sculptures. The closer you get to the treasure house, the more solemn the atmosphere becomes. In front of the gate of the treasure house, there are two teams of elite soldiers standing ready. They are wearing heavy armor, holding shields and swords, exuding a frightening aura. The entrance to the treasure house is two huge stone doors carved with ancient and mysterious patterns. The water dancer stepped forward and said something to the soldiers, and then the two soldiers pushed open the heavy stone door. With a dull sound, the interior of the treasure house was revealed in front of Gavin's eyes. Sir Gavin, please come with me. According to His Highness's order, you only have 1 hour, and you can only take away 2 things to compensate you and the Targaryen princess respectively. The water dancer on the side said solemnly. Gavin nodded slightly and followed the water dancer into this mysterious and tempting treasure house. The moment he stepped into the treasure house, Gavin was shocked by the sight in front of him. Rows of tall display shelves are arranged in an orderly manner, filled with all kinds of rare treasures. On a shelf, there are several Valyrian steel swords, with the unique Valyrian steel pattern on the sword body, and the blade is extremely sharp. In the brocade box next to it, there are also several daggers made of Valyrian steel. Not far away, there is a set of gorgeous armor made of refined gold, which still shines golden in the weak light. The armor is inlaid with various gems, showing its extraordinary value. In the corner of the treasury, there are some precious furs, including white wolf skins from the far north and rare spotted bear skins. In the center of the treasury, there is a huge crystal ball inlaid, and there seems to be clouds and mist inside, emitting a faint light. Next to the crystal ball, several dragon egg fossils are quietly displayed, and the texture on the eggshell seems to tell an ancient story. Going further in, Gavin saw huge dragon bone products piled there. There is also a row of mysterious books with metal covers and inlaid with gems. In addition, there are various exquisite handicrafts made of Valyrian steel, such as small sculptures, gorgeous ornaments, etc., each of which is exquisitely crafted. Chapter 86, Dawn of Valyrian Steel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 86 Valyrian Steel Sword, Dawn. Gavin's eyes slowly swept over the various treasures in the treasury, and then walked straight to the shelf where the weapons were placed. Looking at the Valyrian steel swords on the shelf, Gavin carefully checked them. Finally, he found the emblem of the Bellerys family on the hilt of a sword. It was the family sword that the ancestor of the Bellerys family had lost. Dawn. Gavin's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise and emotion. He gently picked up the sword. The sword body was slender and straight, flashing with a silver-white cold light. The blade was so sharp that the thickness was almost invisible, but it had the sharpness to cut through everything. The hilt was made of dragon bone, with a simple yet atmospheric shape. The guard was slightly curved, just right to protect the hand. Feeling the surging magic of the long sword Dawn, Gavin's mind was full of thoughts. At this moment, he finally made up for his mother's regret. After properly putting Dawn away, Gavin continued to explore in the treasury. He looked around and walked towards the place where the dragon egg fossils were placed in the center of the treasure house. There were 6 dragon egg fossils neatly stacked there. Gavin picked up one and used his magic to feel it carefully. Suddenly, he was surprised to find that this dragon egg actually had a weak vitality. Gavin, who was very excited, immediately checked the other dragon eggs. Unfortunately, only the dragon egg in his hand had vitality, so, he chose this dragon egg as compensation for the rest without hesitation. Gavin said to the water dancer in the distance, "I have chosen it." The water dancer nodded slightly and said, "Sir Gavin, please follow me." Then he took Gavin away. Soon, Gavin found that the other party did not lead him to see the Sea King, but took him directly to the outside of the Sea King's palace. However, Gavin, who had already gained a lot, didn't care about it. After handing the dragon egg to the blood dragon guard who had been waiting here, he slowly walked towards the port. The water dancer walked into the Sea King's palace. The Sea King sat on the gorgeous throne and asked majestically, what did he choose? The water dancer immediately said respectfully, a Valyrian steel sword and a dragon egg fossil. After hearing this, the Sea King fell into deep thought. He was not surprised that Gavin chose the Valyrian steel sword, but why did Gavin choose the dragon egg fossil that could not hatch a dragon? He frowned and muttered to himself, could the dragon egg be intact? Thinking of this, the Sea King's face instantly became gloomy, and his heart was even more distressed, but soon, he comforted himself, it should be impossible, the probability is very small. Then he thought of the trouble he was facing at the moment. Although it was a bit painful to give away these two things, it was a good thing to let Gavin, the troublesome person, leave. The Sea King really didn't dare to take action against Gavin, and it was not easy to explain to the people of Braavos. He could only balance this matter by expelling the other party. Thinking of this, the Sea King sighed helplessly. Gavin returned to the Bellerys with the treasures he had selected, and immediately saw Daenerys, who was waiting anxiously there. Seeing that he had returned safely, she immediately rushed over and hugged Gavin tightly. Gavin gently stroked her hair and said, "Don't worry, I'm fine. The Sea King doesn't dare to attack me easily." Daenerys raised her head, her eyes slightly red, and her voice trembled a little, "I'm just worried about you. It's great that you can come back." Then she asked, "Where are we going now?" Gavin smiled and responded, "The Sea King has allowed us to leave." Daenerys asked again, "Gavin, are we going back to your stone steps?" Gavin shook his head and said, "Not yet. I have to go to the land outside the Great Wall. There are huge woods that can be used to make the keel of warships. I need these things very much now." Daenerys leaned in his arms and said, "I will follow you wherever you go." Gavin patted her shoulder gently, and then ordered everyone on the Bellerys, "Notify the fleet, set sail, and we will leave immediately." As Gavin's order was issued, the entire fleet became busy in an instant. The sailors jumped off the dock, untied the ropes and raised the sails quickly. The sea breeze blew the sails, making a loud sound. The Bellerys took the lead and sailed steadily towards the mouth of the canyon. Gavin held Daenerys' hand, stood at the bow, and looked at the Braavos port that was getting farther and farther away. Daenerys had mixed feelings in her heart. The city where she grew up was gradually becoming blurred in her sight. The familiar streets, the noisy markets, and the friendly faces were all getting farther and farther away. She pursed her lips slightly, and a trace of reluctance and attachment appeared in her eyes. She looked back at Gavin beside her and found that Gavin was also looking at her. The two smiled at each other. The fleet gradually approached the mouth of the canyon, and the purple fleet that was blocking here had already given way. The Bellerys sailed through first, and soon, the entire fleet passed through the Titans. The fleet that successfully passed through this iconic checkpoint once again bid farewell to Braavos completely. The fleet was once again on the endless canyon sea, and Gavin couldn't help but think of the initiator of all this, the messenger from Rhys, and immediately made new arrangements for the fleet. Under his command, 10 sailing ships left the fleet and headed south. If it weren't for the Sea King, Gavin would have already taken action against the messenger from Lys when he was in Braavos. Now that he has left Braavos, Gavin no longer has to worry about anything. Gavin ordered 10 sail warships to wait on several routes that the envoy might take when he returned. Once the enemy was discovered, he would be captured on the Stepstone Islands. After making all the arrangements, Gavin took Daenerys back to the cabin. Gavin took out a small box and placed it on the table. He smiled at Daenerys and said, "Neptune asked me to choose something to compensate you. I think you will like it." Daenerys was filled with curiosity after hearing this. Gavin smiled and said, "It's a fossilized dragon egg. I found that it is still alive." When Daenerys heard this, her eyes lit up with excitement. Gavin opened the box with a smile, and a red dragon egg appeared in front of Daenerys. Daenerys couldn't help but hold her breath, as if she could really feel the powerful power contained in the dragon egg. She walked forward excitedly, gently touching the dragon egg with her hands, her eyes full of anticipation and excitement. "Is it really a dragon egg? This is simply unbelievable. I just heard Viserys describe the dragon egg to me. It seems that there are many dragon egg fossils on Dragonstone, but I have never seen them." Gavin suddenly asked, "Daenerys, has Viserys ever mentioned to you how the Targaryens hatched baby dragons? Chapter 87 How to Hatch Dragon Eggs. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Daenerys thought about it carefully and said, Viserys told me some stories about families hatching dragon eggs. There seems to be no specific hatching method. The Targaryen family will place dragon eggs in the cradle of newborns. If you are lucky, you can hatch it, and it is also possible to hatch the dragon egg in a high-temperature environment. After the dance of the blood dragon, no more dragon eggs were hatched successfully. Later, the Targaryens tried countless methods. There were wizards and even a king was burned to death. The tragedy of Summerhall. Gavin interrupted immediately. Daenerys nodded. Yes, Viserys told me that the then King Aegon V prepared 7 dragon eggs and tried to use wildfire to hatch the dragon eggs in Summerhall. However, the wildfire spread out of control. King Aegon V, his eldest son and many members of the royal family were killed in this disaster, and the dragon eggs disappeared without a trace. Speaking of this, Daenerys also suddenly realized the difficulty of hatching dragon eggs, and couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Gavin fell into deep thought. It seems that the method of hatching dragon eggs mastered by the Targaryen family is not complete, and it is all a matter of luck. He couldn't help but recall the records in the dragon lair of Bellerys. According to the stone tablet in the dragon cave, in addition to the natural hatching of dragon eggs, as long as the dragon eggs still contain vitality, they can be forcibly hatched by burning with dragon flames. The ceremony does not require the sacrifice of life. The key is the blood of the unburnt is needed. Dip the dragon egg into a container filled with the blood of the unburnt, and continue burning it with dragon flame. The blood of the unburnt can effectively prevent the dragon egg from being destroyed by the dragon flame, and can also absorb the magic power contained in the dragon flame. Gavin raised his head and looked at Daenerys, comforting. Don't worry, the Bellerys family has a method, we can try it. Daenerys immediately became excited. Really? Can we try it now? Gavin smiled after hearing this and said, it's not possible now. The containers needed for the ceremony must be made of dragon crystal. Although there are some on the ship, they are all scattered dragon crystal mines. We need to go ashore first and make the containers with dragon flames. Then the ceremony of hatching the dragon eggs will be held. Daenerys suppressed her excitement, nodded and said, okay, Gavin, let's wait. At this time, the fleet arrived at the intersection of the Strait and the Shivering Sea. I saw rough waves. The waves collided with each other, and splashed layers of white foam. The strong wind roared on the sea, causing huge waves. The sky is covered with dark clouds and the thunder is faint, as if the sea is venting its violence and mystery. Gavin plans to go to Skane Island first and try to hatch dragon eggs there. Skane Island is a small island located in the north, located northwest of Skagos Island, and its latitude is further north than the Great Wall. The Skane people on the island had been raided, killed or devoured by the Skagos long ago, as the island is almost uninhabited and is only a short distance from the Hardhome Market at Stod's Head. It's a half-day flight, which makes it convenient for Gavin to use it as a stopover. At the same time on Bloodstone Island, a ship flying the flag of the Crowned Stag finally arrived at the port of Bloodstone Island after more than a month of sailing. As Peter's ship docked slowly, Boris, who had received the news, had already led everyone to greet him respectfully. Peter walked down the side of the ship gracefully, and Boris immediately stepped forward to greet him, saying with a smile, "Dear Lord Peter, welcome to Bloodstone Island again. I heard that you have just assumed the post of Minister of Finance, and I really feel for you." "Delighted. I wonder what your instructions are for coming here." Peter bowed slightly and replied politely, "Thanks to the appreciation of His Majesty the King and the Prime Minister, I have this opportunity. Governor Boris, I am here to convey relevant instructions under the order of the Royal Council." Governor Boris looked stunned and said quickly, "Sir, please make it clear." Peter took out a roll of extremely delicate parchment tied with gold thread and handed it to Boris, and then said solemnly, "From now on, the Stepstone Islands will set up tax officers according to the model of the 5 major ports in Westeros. System, the taxes here are collected by the tax officer I brought, and after annual statistics, they are distributed to Sir Gavin according to the corresponding proportion. Governor Boris looked embarrassed and hurriedly explained, "Sir Peter, Lord Gavin is not in the territory now. I am only the governor of Bloodstone Island and I really have no right to make a decision on this." Peter shook his head slightly and said harmoniously, "Governor Boris, this is an order from the Royal Council and cannot be refused." Governor Boris frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "Sir, in this case, it will be as you say. Your tax officer can collect taxes here, but my people must follow the supervision. In addition, all taxes collected are the same. It cannot be transported away from Bloodstone Island, and the final decision must be made after Lord Gavin returns." Peter nodded, still maintaining a gentle tone, "That'll be it for now. Thank you Governor Boris for your cooperation." Peter paused and then said, "There is one more thing. According to the laws of the kingdom, the Stepstone Islands are prohibited from purchasing slaves. Governor, please pay attention to this matter." Boris frowned and responded, "Sir, I have taken note of this matter, but how to implement it will have to wait until Sir Gavin comes back to discuss it." Peter looked serious. "That is natural, but before Sir Gavin returns, no more ships transporting slaves must enter the Stepstone Islands." After Boris settled Peter, he hurried back to his official residence. He looked solemn and immediately called his men. "Go, send someone to keep an eye on all the people who just got off the ship. Don't let go of any of their actions. Report any abnormalities to me immediately. In addition, send someone to quickly call back Commander Hassan who is cruising near Grey Gallows Island. Don't make any mistakes." Boris ordered sternly. The men responded in unison and quickly turned to execute the order. After more than 10 days of sailing, the fleet finally arrived at Skagen Island. The island looks desolate and lonely, with rugged rocks and sparse vegetation. The cold wind whistled past, freezing cold, as if it could penetrate the bone marrow. The two warships put down the boats full of soldiers, and they carefully stepped onto this strange land for advance reconnaissance. Gavin was not idle either. He summoned the Blazing Shadow, took the dragon crystal prepared in advance, and rode the Blazing Shadow with Daenerys to fly to the island. Looking down from the air, the scene on the island is clearer. Large areas of rocks are exposed, and only a small number of cold-resistant plants grow hard in the cold wind. The tops of the distant mountains were even covered with white snow, looking cold and majestic under the gloomy sky. Gavin and Daenerys were on the back of the dragon Blazing Shadow, feeling the biting cold wind, and flew towards a cliff by the sea. Chapter 88 Viserion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chiaying's huge body landed on the cliff. Gavin hugged Daenerys tightly, then jumped lightly, holding her in his arms and jumped off the dragon's back, landing firmly on the ground with his feet. He quickly took out all the dragon crystals and piled them all together, and then with a serious expression ordered Chiaying to burn the black dragon crystals with dragon flames. Under the high-temperature dragon flames, the dragon crystal began to gradually soften and emit a dazzling light. Gavin concentrated on it and took the opportunity to use the Pyromancer's ability to accurately control the dragon crystal that flowed like magma. His hands kept gesticulating, as if creating a precious work of art. Daenerys watched all this nervously and expectantly, her hands clenched unconsciously, and her breathing became rapid. She never took her eyes away from Gavin's movements for a moment, and at the same time she was full of trust in Gavin's ability. This process lasted for a long time, and finally, after the dragon crystal cooled naturally, a black and rough round basin appeared in front of Gavin and Daenerys. Daenerys took a deep breath, looked at this ugly container, a trace of worry flashed in her eyes, and said, "Is this possible?" Gavin wiped the sweat from his forehead, with a smile on his face, and said, "It's just a container for blood. The next step is the key. Whether it succeeds or not should have nothing to do with appearance." After Gavin put the dragon eggs prepared in advance into a slightly larger dragon crystal basin, he looked at Daenerys on the side with encouragement. Gavin expected that he would need a lot of blood, and it would be difficult for him to produce blood alone. Fortunately, Daenerys is also the unburnt. Daenerys had already heard Gavin's explanation. She took a deep breath, took out the dagger, gritted her teeth and cut her wrist. Dark red blood gurgled out, flowing down her hand into the black stone basin and dripping on the dragon egg. As the blood flowed more and more, her face gradually turned pale and her body trembled slightly. Seeing this, Gavin quickly took out the potion, cut his wrist, dripped blood into the potion, and handed it to Daenerys to drink. After taking the potion, Daenerys' wrist injury healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Gavin ignored his wounds and continued to release his blood into the basin. When Gavin felt a little haggard, the blood in the basin finally covered the dragon egg. Gavin suppressed his weakness, took out a dragon crystal lid with holes on it, and carefully placed it on the stone basin. At this time, the dragon egg in the stone basin was completely wrapped in blood, emitting a strange and mysterious light. Gavin ordered Chiaing to carefully spray out dragon flames, and the raging dragon flames instantly enveloped the dragon crystal basin. Under the heat of the dragon flames, the dragon crystal basin no longer showed signs of melting as before, but instead glowed red, like red-hot iron. Daenerys watched expectantly, clasping her hands together, silently praying that the dragon egg would hatch successfully. Gavin comforted him, "It may not be completed for a while. The dragon flames will continue to spray for a long time. Please wait patiently." The two of them just waited on the edge of the cliff. The sky gradually darkened, and the waves kept hitting the bottom of the cliff, making bursts of roaring sounds. The sea breeze became colder and colder, making their clothes rustle. Although the dragon flames that Chiaing breathed out were relatively small, he looked tired after breathing for a long time. He stopped several times and looked at Gavin with eyes full of complaints. After seeing this, Gavin could only show an apologetic expression and couldn't help but comfort him. Finally, the red dragon crystal basin started to move, shaking violently, as if the blood inside was boiling. Gavin immediately ordered Chiaing to stop spraying dragon flames, then comforted Chiaing and let him fly into the sea to hunt for prey. As the blazing shadow flew away, the surroundings became quiet for a while, with only the sounds of the sea breeze and waves. Gavin and Daenerys stared nervously at the burning red dragon crystal basin, not daring to breathe. Gavin was not sure whether this method could hatch a dragon. Finally, the dragon crystal basin stopped shaking. They immediately stared nervously at the dragon crystal basin. Suddenly, the lid of the dragon crystal basin was pushed up by a force, and then fell down again. Gavin immediately took the lid away, and a small and delicate the mighty red dragon appeared in the basin. It spread its immature wings and gave a clear cry to Gavin, its eyes full of curiosity about the world. This young dragon is about the size of a kitten. It has sharp chamfers on its head, which adds a bit of majesty. Its whole body is covered with gorgeous dark red scales, which shine like gems under the afterglow of the setting sun. Such a bright light, extremely beautiful. The little dragon seemed to instinctively feel the kindness of Gavin and Daenerys. It staggered out of the basin and flew around them a few times, then landed on Daenerys' shoulder and rubbed its head against her affectionately. Cheeks, and a low chirp came out of its mouth, as if telling its joy. Daenerys stroked the dragon's scales in surprise, her eyes filled with joy. Gavin looked at this scene and smiled and said, "Give it a name." Daenerys couldn't help but think of the dead Viserys. This dragon egg was also compensated for his death, and she said with a thought, "Call him Viserion." Hearing this name, the little dragon seemed to feel something and flapped its wings happily. After returning to the Bellerys again, Daenerys held Viserion in her arms with joy, excitement shining in her eyes. She couldn't wait to find a piece of tender meat and carefully handed it to Viserion, fully expecting him to feast on it. However, Viserion just leaned over, sniffed it gently with his small nose, and then turned his head away in disgust, showing no interest in the piece of meat. Seeing this, Gavin smiled and explained, "Dragons usually only eat cooked food. You should let it breathe fire. Once it obeys your command to spray dragon flames, it truly belongs to you and will only obey your orders from now on." Daenerys' heart was pounding when she heard this. She was nervous and expectant, and there was a trace of uneasiness that was difficult to conceal. She took a deep breath, trying to make her voice sound firm and powerful, and said to Viserion, "Dragon flame, Viserion, dragon flame." Viserion tilted his small and exquisite head, and looked at Daenerys with a blank look in his round eyes, as if he didn't understand Daenerys' intention at all. Daenerys was not discouraged. She raised her voice again and ordered with expectation, "Viserion, breathe fire." Finally, after Daenerys's unremitting attempts, Viserion seemed to suddenly realize it. He first shook the scales on his body, then opened his mouth and sprayed a ball of dragon flame as weak as a candle at the piece of meat. Although the small dragon flame was weak, it quickly cooked the meat, and the aroma instantly spread. Then Viserion ate the cooked meat with relish. Gavin immediately observed Viserion eating and said to Daenerys with a smile, "It looks like the little guy is quite fierce." Chapter 89, Hardship Village. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The bay near Hardship formed a natural deep-water harbor and was rich in various resources. As a result, the place almost developed into a savage town, governed by several tribal leaders. The timber merchant that Vika mentioned before obtained the huge timber from here. In Hardship, the sun shines on the sea, making the waves sparkle like tiny pieces of gold. The originally peaceful savages were busy each other in an orderly manner. Suddenly, someone pointed in the distance and shouted in panic, "Look! What is that?" Everyone turned their heads and saw dozens of huge ships suddenly appearing on the sea. Like towering mountains, the crowd instantly fell into chaos, with shouts and screams coming and going, intertwining into a noisy piece of music. What's going on? Is it the crow's ship? Go and inform the leader. That the people fled in all directions, some hurriedly ran home to grab their weapons, while others ran wildly in the direction of the leader. Gavin stood on the bow of the Bellerys, looking at the chaotic wildling gathering on the shore in the distance. He turned to Daenerys and said, "You will stay on the Bellerys in a while. When I am not around, the fleet obeys your orders." Daenerys frowned and said with a worried look on her face, "Gavin, I always feel that there will be danger. You'd better ride the blazing shadow over there." Gavin said with relief, "Don't worry, it's just a business. Besides, riding the blazing shadow will easily cause those savages to have an overreaction." Afterwards, Gavin took several blood dragon guards and captains in 3 small boats and rowed slowly towards Hardhome. The savages on the shore looked at the 3 boats coming in. They all clenched their weapons and gathered towards the shore, staring at Gavin warily. As Gavin stepped ashore, the savages looked at their team of only a dozen people and relaxed slightly, but they still surrounded Gavin tightly and had no intention of leaving. Gavin looked around calmly and saw a group of savages in the distance struggling to push through the crowd and striding towards here. As the wildlings moved out of the way, Gavin's eyes were fixed on a woman walking at the front. It looked like the female leader who would cooperate with Jon Snow in evacuating the wildlings in the future. As for her name, Gavin thought for a moment. Unable to get up, he thought to himself, she must be the rightful owner. The woman was tall and slender, with sharp eyes like an eagle. She was wearing a dress made of thick fur. She walked straight to Gavin, looked him up and down, and said coldly, "People from the south, why did you come to our territory?" Gavin bowed slightly and said politely, "Hello madam, my name is Gavin Bellerys. I bring enough food, sophisticated weapons, and some living supplies, and I want to exchange some goods with the free people." The woman snorted coldly when she heard this. "Humph, I hope you are telling the truth. There were merchants coming here to trade before, but there were also many people with evil intentions who wanted to rob free people and make them slaves. Now those people are eaten by the Thens. It's gone. I advise you to put away other thoughts here." Gavin smiled and nodded. "Madam, I only brought a dozen people here this time, which is enough to show my sincerity." "What do you call them?" the woman said with a cold expression. "Just call me Osha. Come with me, you southerner." After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the depths of the camp. Seeing this, Gavin also led others to follow closely behind. Osha led Gavin and his team to walk in the camp. Gavin looked around and saw that the surrounding environment was extremely simple. Some roughly built shacks were scattered in disorder, and simple tools were placed haphazardly. Several dirty savage children ran over curiously and watched Gavin and his party. After a while, they came to a large wooden house. Osha motioned to Gavin to wait here, and then walked in. Gavin stood quietly outside the door, and the low voices of conversation coming from inside the house could be faintly heard. After a while, Osha came out and invited Gavin into the house. there was a strong bonfire burning in the center of the hall, and several savage leaders were sitting around it, all looking at Gavin. One of the leaders was the first to ask, "Southerners, tell me, how many furs do you want to exchange for from us, and how much food do you have?" After hearing this, Gavin responded, "Dear leaders, I am not here for furs, but in exchange for giant trees that can be used to build ships." Hearing Gavin's words, the leaders looked at each other and looked at each other. One of them couldn't help but frowned and said, "Wood? Someone did come here to exchange for it before, but the wood was brought by the giants. There is no stock here now. If you need it, you can only go to the giant, but the giant is not in Hardhome now." Gavin looked calm, and after thinking for a moment, he said, "I want you to help me contact those giants, and I am willing to pay a certain amount of reward for this. As long as the other party is willing to trade with me, I will also offer another generous reward to express my gratitude." Grateful. Another leader touched his chin with his hand and said thoughtfully, "That sounds good. How much can you give?" Gavin continued, "Half a ship of supplies. If you can help me reach a deal, the remaining half of a ship of supplies will also belong to you." At this time, Osha, who had been silent, spoke, "Southerners, we agree. But we need time to contact the giants, and half the shipload of supplies you promised to pay must be delivered to us now." Gavin nodded slightly and said, "Yes, I will stay here while waiting. I hope you can give me a definite answer as soon as possible." Countless boats shuttled back and forth on the sea, busy transporting supplies. Osha opened a bag containing grain at will, and saw that the grain inside was full, bright in color, and exuding an alluring aroma. She picked up a long sword again, with a sharp blade, exquisite workmanship, and high quality. Osha looked at these supplies. These things were much better than those paid by the merchants who came here before. Osha walked towards Gavin, who was standing on the beach. Gavin felt someone approaching and turned around to see it was Osha. He smiled and said hello. Osha saw that Gavin's eyes had lost the previous alertness, and said, "We will send out manpower to find the giants in a while, and there will be news in about 5 or 6 days. Southerners, don't you plan to exchange for some of our furs?" Gavin said calmly, "Well, yes, but I give priority to exchanging wood. I only brought 30 shiploads of goods. If there is any left over in the end, I don't mind exchanging for some furs to take back." After hearing this, Osha immediately said, "I'm afraid the wood you can exchange for these things can only be exchanged for half even if the giant's inventory is taken out. Besides, they only need food and do not need these weapons and supplies. For them, these are the weapons are too small, and you will definitely have a lot of supplies left." Chapter 90 Daenerys' Family. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Gavin thought for a moment and said slowly, "Yes, in addition to food, I can also exchange you for 3 ships of weapons." At this moment, a group of crows flew over Hardhome and kept circling. Gavin felt something and immediately looked at the group of crows. A feeling of being watched suddenly hit his heart. He guessed in his mind that it must be the attention of the three-eyed crow. The crows seemed to sense Gavin's gaze and quickly flew away from the area. Afterwards, Gavin no longer paid attention to the crows, but chatted with Osha beside him. Gavin also learned about the current situation of the savages from Osha. At present, Mance Rayder has not yet become the king beyond the wall, but with his outstanding eloquence and leadership skills, he still brings together nearly half of the wildling tribe. However, the savage tribes near the land of eternal winter in the north showed unusual movements, and they began to migrate south one after another. Mance Rayder claimed that he had discovered traces of the White Walkers. But for the savages living in Hardhome, all this seems too incredible. They had not seen it with their own eyes, so they doubted Mance Rayder's story. Talking about the White Walkers, Osha suddenly asked, "Southerners, do you believe in the existence of White Walkers?" After hearing this, Gavin felt something in his heart. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I believe, and within a year or 2, you should be able to contact him." After hearing this, Osha was filled with doubts and asked, "Why? Why do you dare to be so sure?" Gavin looked serious and said solemnly, "The White Walkers are real, and as the weather gets colder, they will gradually invade southward. The savage tribes in the north will also be forced to move south because of the White Walkers, until the White Walkers have forced you to retreat, and you can only try to attack the Great Wall. In the end, most of you will die during the siege, and the remaining people will have to wait to die north of the Great Wall. After hearing this, Osha looked in disbelief. She felt that this southerner was deceiving her, and asked angrily, "How can you guarantee that what you say is true? Why should I believe a southerner?" Gavin looked calm and said calmly, "You don't need to believe me, Osha, time will prove it. I plan to give you a way out. As for whether you choose, it's up to you. The wood I want to buy must be painted with anti-corrosion paint. Therefore, I set up a transfer station on Skane Island not far from Hardhome. There will be ships left there. When you really face the situation of the White Walkers heading south but cannot escape, you can take your tribe with you. Take refuge there in my ship." After hearing this, Osha looked solemn and said warily, "Southerners, why do you want to help us? Free people will never kneel down, or do you want to sell free people as slaves?" Gavin smiled and said calmly, "If I want you to kneel down, I will let you go to my territory, the Stone Steppe Islands. As for enslaving you, with my strength, there is no need to use deception." As Gavin finished speaking, a ball of fire with a diameter of more than 1 meter instantly shot out from his hand and rushed towards the sea in front of him. When the raging and blazing flames meet the sea water, a large amount of steam evaporates instantly. Osha was so frightened by Gavin's mysterious method that she quickly backed away, drew her weapon, and looked at Gavin warily. Gavin slowly retracted his right hand, looked at Osha who was on guard at the side, and said calmly, "Leaving you here to die will undoubtedly increase the strength of the White Walkers. For me, it may add some trouble, that's all. As for my suggestions, think about it when you need to face the White Walkers." Afterwards, Gavin ignored the wary female leader and turned around to leave. On the Bellerys, after Gavin arranged the division of labor for several captains, he walked towards the cabin. Upon entering the room, Daenerys is seen teasing Viserion. Seeing this, Gavin also got involved. The two teased Viserion together. Daenerys stroked Viserion's scales and couldn't help but sigh. "When I was a child, I always listened to Viserys telling me about the magic of dragons." "Gavin, you said it. How long does it take to grow to the size of Chieying?" After hearing this, Gavin also fell into thinking. Gavin could only speculate on Blazing Shadow's age. After all, it was often starved of food when it was in the dragon's lair in Valyria, so it was lucky to survive. Malnutrition will definitely lead to its size not reaching the size of a dragon of its age. Gavin has always suspected that the size of Chieying after the upgrade is consistent with its true age. However, in just 2 months since Chieying advanced, it has grown a lot, and it is now about 26 meters tall. It became increasingly cramped on the deck of the Bellerys, so much so that Gavin could only keep it inside him during long voyages. Thinking of this, Gavin guessed, it will probably take more than 10 years. The stone tablet in the dragon's lair only describes the history of the Bellerys family and mentions some techniques for training dragons and hatching dragon eggs. The knowledge left by the Bellerys family has been turned into powder in the long river of time. I am afraid that the knowledge related to dragons is not as much as that of the Targaryen family. After all, in the more than 100 years since the Targaryen family conquered Westeros, the number of dragons has steadily increased, even reaching more than 20 at its peak. It's just that Daenerys doesn't know much today. Her knowledge comes from Viserys, and Viserys was still young when he escaped from the Red Keep, so he probably hasn't systematically understood that knowledge yet. If you want to find this knowledge now, you probably have to browse the books in the Red Keep and the Academy in Old Town, but neither of these places is easy to enter. Suddenly, Gavin thought of a person, Aemon Targaryen, the old man who was a maester at the Wall. He was Daenerys's great-uncle. A member of the Targaryen family who lived long enough must know this knowledge, and the Black Castle where he is now is not far from us. Thinking of this, Gavin asked Daenerys, "Do you know your great-uncle Aemon Targaryen?" After hearing this, Daenerys fell into thought. Seeing her puzzled look, Gavin immediately explained to her. After hearing Gavin's explanation, Daenerys immediately said excitedly, "Gavin, I want to meet him. This should be the last of my people." Suddenly, she said with a worried look on her face, "If I go to see him, will it harm him? The usurper will definitely kill him when he knows. Gavin gently patted Daenerys' hand and comforted her, don't worry, the usurper will not do anything to an old man who is nearly 100 years old. Besides, you can dress up as my servant. Daenerys immediately smiled, really? Then when can we go? Gavin thought for a while and said, it should be soon. After I finish dealing with things here, it will take about 10 days.